Hello, and welcome to the lecture for Chapter 18, The Arts of Islam in Africa. We left our discussion with kind of dealing with Gothic art from Chapter 15 and talked about how the Roman culture was starting to influence it. Well, the Roman culture enveloped the entire Mediterranean, and after the death of Constantine, it was really divided into the East and West. The West emerged as Europe, and the East emerged as the Islamic state. So the first style that we're going to talk about is the style of Islam. The term Islam emerged in the 7th century, and it means submission. And Muslim are those who practice the religion of Islam, and it means those who submit. Muhammad was the last prophet of Islam, and the Islam empire really expanded and extended a long ways, all the way from Spain to the borders of India. In Islam, we have a belief that if an artist were trying to recreate the living forms of humans, they would be competing with Allah, who created all things. So therefore, we're not going to see human figures in religious art in Islam. When we're looking at architecture, we're going to be looking at mosques and palaces. Mosques are the places where Islams go to pray and worship, and mosques were inspired by Muhammad's residence, which was built by brick. It has central courtyard and an open porch that was shaded. We can see some of these characteristics at the Congregational Mosque at Kairouan from 836. So you can see some similarities between this and a Roman basilica as well. A Roman basilica is a longitudinal building, sometimes had a porch, an open courtyard in front of it. You can see the shaded porch here, and then this is the interior of the mosque. You can see it has 2 domes that mark the center aisle and lead to the niche in the Qibla wall, known as the mihrab, which indicates the direction to Mecca. So right here we can see a tower that's based on the design of a Roman lighthouse as well. And we're going to look at the interior next. So this is what the interior looks like. This is made of basically just a forest of columns known as a hypostyle hall. We've seen this type of hypostyle hall in Egyptian art, but we can definitely see some Roman influence here. If you look at the capitals of the columns, they look like Ionic columns, and then you have the arches that are more Roman with the voussoirs, which we saw that in kind of early medieval art. So there is going to be some influence in both ways from the art of particularly the Byzantines and the arts of Islam. You'll notice that the interior becomes very shadowy and very almost otherworldly. So whereas the Gothic cathedrals relied on stained glass windows for that effect, here we're seeing more of light and shadow that kind of create that kind of otherworldly effect. You'll also notice how it's divided into these little sections. This is much more an individual style of worship rather than having a large congregation like we would have seen in Christianity. So it's made for individuals to come and set up their prayer mats and to be able to pray kind of individually. This is the dome in front of the mihrab from the Great Mosque at Cordoba from 965. It's made of 8 intersecting arches, which you can kind of see here, for example. You'll notice that it's gold, like we would have seen in Byzantine architecture, and it was heavily influenced by Byzantine style in terms of using that gold and that kind of color of blue, but you'll notice that there's a big difference. And the difference is that we don't see human figures in Islamic architecture or art. And that is because of their belief in it being a false idolatry, even though the Christians got away with that because they considered it to be abstract enough. The Quran really forbids any idols, and so you're going to see no religious imagery. Instead, what you're going to see are geometric patterns, stylized plants, and Arabic script. So you can see the script here, and this kind of reminds you maybe a little bit of the animal style in early medieval art. And you can see some of that same kind of patterning on the Christian piece. So there are some similarities, but the major difference, of course, is going to be that the absence of human figures. This is Friday Mosque from 1121. This was influenced by nearby Persia. We have a pointed arch here as well within a rectangular frame. This is called an Iwan and marks the entrance into the mosque. You'll notice that we have these what look like scooped out little triangular niches. These are called makranas and are common in Islamic architecture. In fact, you can see several here. This is the entry portal to the Shah Mosque from 1611 to 66. So lots of makranas here, and really just, it creates almost like a cave-like appearance where you have stalactites kind of coming down from the ceiling. It has a blue glaze, which was common in this part of the world. We can see that in this much, much earlier piece from Babylon, but you see that same kind of blue glaze. There's a sense of intricate design here, which satisfies the urge for beauty, as well as the mind's desire for order and pattern. So you're going to see a lot of pattern upon pattern upon pattern in Islamic art. This is the Court of the Lions from the Alhambra Palace from the 14th century, and it's a rare remaining palace of an Arab ruler. It's very delicate and refined. You do have columns and arches, but notice how the columns have become very, very skinny, tall, and then you have this almost like lacework wall carving that creates a very delicate feel. There's an indoor-outdoor space flow, so in between the indoors and the outdoors. All of the design work that you're seeing here is going to be Arab script combined with geometric and floral designs. And you'll notice how the light comes through the small openings that create a very luminous feel. And even though this is a more secular building, there is still religion here, as above the columns there's calligraphy that says, "There is no victor save God." This is the Taj Mahal. This was a tomb for a ruler's favorite wife. It has a white marble exterior. You'll notice that it has an Iwan with the rectangular structure and then the arched opening within that. The proportions of the dome make the building seem light. It's kind of an onion-shaped dome. And the reflection in front also creates a floating feeling. So there's this effort here to make this building very lightweight and elevated. Moving on to the book arts, calligraphy was highly admired as a form of prayer in the arts of Islam. So it was really considered to be like, if you were a calligrapher, it was a form of prayer to create illuminated pages. The Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, is never illustrated with images of humans. Rather, you're going to see geometric designs as well as Arabic script. This is a page from the Quran from 1307. You'll notice that it has a frame made of gold, and then you see that color, that cobalt blue again, and then you have the bold calligraphy that fills the frame. So this type of calligraphy was something that was seen to be a true art form, as well as, you know, the linear quality kind of becomes aesthetic in itself. This is Bahram Gur and the Princess in the Black Pavilion from 1538. You notice that it's very detailed and complex. It has that architecture that we're familiar with now with that rectangular frame and then the pointed arch inside of it. You'll see very bold colors as well as just pattern upon pattern upon pattern everywhere you look. And there's kind of a mixed perspective as well. So we're kind of looking down on the figures here, and then we're looking kind of straight on the figure up here. So there's not really an effort to show like linear perspective or one perspective. Rather, we're seeing multiple viewpoints at once. So you'll notice that we do have human figures here, but this is, again, not a religious artwork. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk to you about the mosque lamp. In the arts of Islam, all objects were created with skill. Any object that was created with skill was considered to be on the same level. So that included textiles, metalwork, and ceramics, along with architecture and illuminated manuscripts. So this has a symbolic function because it is ceramic. It does not shed any light. It is a common palette that we're going to see used in this part of the world as well as by Persian potters. And it was influenced by Chinese wares. You can see the calligraphy here representing Arabic script, but it also has this very aesthetic quality as it kind of moves across the piece. All right, so that's going to bring us to the end of the arts of Islam, and now we're moving on to the style of African art. So when we're talking about Africa, it's important to note that the Egyptian culture actually rose because of riches supplied by Africa. Nubia, which is south of Egypt, was linked by trade routes to the south of the Sahara, and you would see things like ebony, ivory, gold, incense, and skins being traded. In Africa, we have many cultures, and one thing that these cultures have in common is that they do not set aside places for care or enjoyment of art. Instead, art is going to be used for religious rituals, civic life, and community functions. So it's really part of life rather than kind of being set apart. So here's the area that we're talking about. This is the ornament from the tomb of a queen. I cannot attempt to say that name. From the Kush culture from 50 to 1 BCE. In it, we're seeing a ram's head protruding from the background. The ram's head here is a symbol of the solar deity Amun, and the sun is rising over the ram. I think we can see some Egyptian influence here in the material that's being used, as well as that sun deity, the solar deity. This is the oldest surviving example of sub-Saharan art. It's a head from the Nok culture from 500 BCE to 200 CE. It's made of terracotta and has a very smooth surface, so a lot of technical ability has been used to create this piece. It has characteristic D-shaped eyes. It was life-size, so it was part of a larger figure. You can see how it's broken off down here. You'll notice that it has holes in the nose, the mouth, and the eyes. Those are there actually to for the firing process, so that heat could be distributed evenly throughout the head. And it's very characteristic of the Nok culture. You'll notice that we have some parts of this that are modeled, and then you have some parts that are carved or incised. So if you look at the eyes, for example, you'll see how the eyes kind of curve out, so that's modeling. And then they've used tools to incise around the eyes as well. So we're seeing multiple techniques being used here. This is a male portrait head from the Ife culture from the 13th century. It's a thin-walled, hollow metal casting. And you can see it's very realistic and made in such a way to really be an individual portrait of a person. You'll notice it has scarification lines. Those emphasize the facial contours. And then it has these small holes that are around the head. Those actually would have held a beaded veil originally. So the Benin culture was one of the two most sustained art producing cultures that rose near the Nok region. In the Benin culture, kings were considered to be sacred. And we have a couple of examples here of Benin art. On the right, you can see royal altar to the hand and the king being shown in hierarchical scale. You'll also notice that he has a large head when compared to the rest of his body. That is there to show his wisdom and knowledge. And then let me give you a close-up of the altar to the king Avaramwen. So this was really seen as an intended to be an assemblage. So all of these parts are working together to create this altar. The king here is in the center. You'll see that he's surrounded by his attendants, and you'll notice that is shown in hierarchical scale, as well as the head being larger, like we talked about with the last piece that we looked at. There are leopards in front, and really meant to be shown as a symbol of power over all the creatures. The conventional face that you see here represented over and over again is kind of later in Benin art, but you can see here. So this is a house post from the mid 20th century, and a lot of the artwork that we look at from African art will be later, but it is showing kind of what they did earlier on in their traditions, as these traditions have been passed down generation to generation. And part of the reason we don't have a lot of really ancient African art is because of the materials that they were made out of. A lot of the times they would be made out of wood or textile, things that just don't last a long time. But anyway, this is a house post. It was literal support for a roof, and really a meditation on the idea of support. So these figures are actually supporting the house that it was made for. The elder of the tribe is on the top, and then you have a woman holding a baby on her back, a woman holding her breasts, and these represent wisdom, nurturing, and hospitality. And these are all characteristics that support the community. So this is tomb of former Chief Lisa, and you can see some of these posts, similar posts on the exterior of this building. And these posts were there to add significance and to honor his memory. This is a seated couple from the Dogon culture. You'll notice that they're seated on a stool, and there's 4 smaller figures underneath. These smaller figures are ancestors and are really shown to be supporting the couple up above. There is a symbolic link as the man wraps his arm around the woman and touches her breast. His other arm is indicating his genitals, which is a symbol of procreation. There's a lot of symbolic meaning in this work, as the stool links them both physically and symbolically. Common in the Dogon culture's art are these tubular torsos and angular limbs, as well as the horseshoe-shaped hips. There's a fundamental unity between the figures, although there are differences. So the figures look very similar, but the differences are that the man is larger, and he's gesturing to the woman's breast and really signifying her role as a nurturer. It's not a specific portrait of these people, but rather more a symbolic portrait of a man and a woman, and really telling their different roles in society. Part of that is that a woman, the woman on her back, if we could see the back here, is actually carrying a child, where the man is carrying a quiver, a weapon. So the man is shown as the hunter-provider, and the woman is shown as the life-giver and nurturer. This would have served as an altar to communicate with ancestors. Guanduso, from the Bamana culture from the 13th to 15th century. This belonged to the Guan or Zhou Society, which was a women's organization that helped women with child-related things. So you'll notice that she has regal, downcast eyes and a very intricate cap, which indicates her high status. And you notice how the baby sits on her lap and really seems to merge with her figure and is there to kind of represent the idea of the woman and the child kind of becoming one or being very much of the same kind of connection. This is a Kondi figure from the Congo from before 1878. It is a Minkisi, which is a power figure that's made to bring about change. It's a container that holds materials that are used in rituals and is meant to be a ferocious hunter. You notice that on the face, how it looks very ferocious with the eyes kind of wide open and the brow furrowed and the mouth kind of baring the teeth. It's meant to show that kind of ferociousness and was meant to hunt and to punish wrongdoers. You'll see that the surface has a lot of materials that have been added to it. That empowers the sculpture as well as reminds it of its purpose. And you can enact the sculpture by driving nails or blades into it. So it's really very ceremonial and was meant to be added upon. In Africa, we have masquerades, which is an art of spiritual agency and combines culture, costume, music, and movement, and really brings spirit to the community. After a while, the objects used in a masquerade, the power will fade and can be considered to be worthless. This is the Temne Noah masquerade from 1976, an image of it. The mask here that we're seeing is called the Noah and is the guiding spirit of the Bondo, which is a segment of the society that prepares girls for adult status. The spirits guide and protect on the journey to adulthood. The mask represents the ideal of female beauty and modesty. And the rings on it actually represent the emergence from childhood into adulthood, or it could represent water. Notice the elaborate hairdo as a symbol of the higher status in society. And then lastly, this is Ijile from the Achala culture, from an image from 1983. This is a most honored mask that's seen only at funerals of important people, and it's supposed to ease the transition into the next world. It has many symbols upon it and layered meanings. It's supposed to resemble an anthill, which is seen as a portal into the next world. You also see multiple figures and masks on it. And it moves with great energy. So this is, the movement is an important part of the artwork as well. So one of the really interesting things about African art is that it combines more than one, it's not just visual art, but it's the art of dance. And so you have combinations of different artworks in it. So that's going to bring us to the end of chapter 18, and I will see you next time.